the Suarez Live Podcast 2024, episode 42. I'm Will Evans here with Keith Whitelock and Corey Rosser for this special live episode, I guess. Usually it'd be me and Brad rabbiting on about some Teamless Tuesday stuff, but given, we haven't actually given you a podcast either. So this week post the Eels game, but also in light of the Shaun Johnson retirement bombshell, we've drafted in a couple of 2023 guest hosts. Keith's been on a few times, and the host of the revamped Everything Rugby League podcast himself, which we'll put the links up to post-show, and Corey Rosser, long-term NRL.com journalist, and a good buddy of mine as well, and he was on the show last year as well. Boys, big week in Warriors land, and great to have you guys here to discuss
it. Yeah, huge. Saddened by the news, actually. I think we spoke about the past couple of times that I was on. We sort of gave a hypothetical comparison, like who's the Warriors' number one halfback of all time as SJ surpassed Stacey. Now we're talking in retrospectives, or will be in a few weeks' time. So I know I think we can both agree that he was certainly our favourite player. And I think Cameron George is right when he said that he is single-handedly responsible for hundreds, if not thousands, of young kids, both boys and girls, playing rugby league in the land of the long white cloud. So he'll be missed, but I'm sure he'll remain on the scene with the club in some capacity.
Yeah, incredibly unique career, and we'll dig into that a little bit. First of all, brought to you by our sponsors, Kingz Container Crew, of course. Head to kingscontainercrew.com for all your container packing and unpacking solutions throughout Australia and New Zealand. Thanks very much to the Kingz boys, who I'm sure will be watching the rest of the season with a little bit of a heavy heart, with SJ hanging up the boots. If you're joining us on the Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram live thing, bear with me first of all. I'm still getting the hang of it. Bit of a shambles last week, but anyway, some people seem to enjoy it. If you want to chuck some questions or comments in the live chat, go for it. I'll see if we're dexterous enough to answer some questions at the same time. Corey, I mean, you covered Shaun's career pretty much as you mentioned on Twitter yesterday. The start of your sort of journalistic career, I guess, coincided with the start of Shaun's professional career. You've probably interviewed him hundreds of times by now. How did the news hit you yesterday?
Yeah, it was a weird one, Will. It was actually strangely sort of emotional, looking at all the tweets coming through and all the highlights, sort of stopping and probably evidence to the player that he was, that there's just so many of those moments that you totally forgot about. He just had so many unreal plays that just you can't even imagine, like Jamie Wall, I think it was, put up the try against Cronulla after the Ryan Hoffman charge down, what must have been mid 2010s, and you just look at that and you're like, how did he do that? So it was a weird feeling last night, to know that there'll be a season without Shaun Johnson. And yeah, like I say, I thought that some of the tributes that sort of flowed in for Shaun were excellent. We'll look back on Shaun, I think, probably as the greatest individual game changer of the modern NRL era. And by that, I mean, he did it on a consistent basis for over a decade. There's been others, Ben Barber, Jared Hayne, but they didn't do it for the length of time that Shaun did it. And the reality was, when you had Shaun Johnson in your team, you were always a chance. You were just always a chance. So, crazy sort of time. Obviously, we knew it was a possibility. And I was actually just saying to my partner when I watched him run out for the last game, he was soaking it in. You could see him talking to himself. And I actually said to her, like, that looks like a man that's about to retire to me. And sure enough, a few days later, it came through. So, yeah.
He has since said on his Play on Sport podcast that it was a decision made before the Parramatta game. It wasn't a sort of reaction to how that went or how he felt during that game, and he felt that he took what he needed to out of that game. But it is a fascinating juncture for it to happen and for us to be talking about it. I mean, it's created this really nostalgic atmosphere with a lot of emotion, overwhelming positive outpouring of support for him, and all the tributes, and seeing all those old highlights again, as you mentioned, Corey. It's also come at a bit of a low ebb for the team, very close to our finals chances being extinguished. As a fan, I'd just about say the lowest point of since the Webster Revolution began. We'll talk a bit more about the game specifically later, but yeah, it was obviously a really gut punch of a game on Friday, and then still stung on Monday, to be honest, for me. And then the Shaun news drops. It sort of puts a different lens on it. Probably not going to make the finals, but it certainly puts everything in a new light as far as what we're watching for. Shaun's last few games in the jersey. Maybe he can at least find a couple of more magic moments for us to remember him by. Whether that's to keep us in the race mathematically for another week or two or not. It sort of feels like we've got more to watch for, and the team's got more to play for, even if that finals chance is really tiny now.
Yeah, I think ultimately the discourse that he created throughout the course of his career should be seen as a compliment, because we knew that if anyone's going to change our fortunes, and it's been a pretty miserable decade, to be honest, but we always knew that SJ was that play with the magic dust that could turn any game on its head at any time, as Corey alluded to. So that sort of dichotomy of the criticism that came when he couldn't pull a rabbit out of a hat versus the praise that came when he did, and the sort of division between the fans around him, is ultimately a compliment, because we knew he was always our most important player during his time with us, maybe with the exception of 2011 when James Maloney was the senior partner in the half. So I think, any fan, now that he's retired and he's no longer, or as in a few weeks, it would no longer actually be an active player for us, I think that if you're not a fan that's looking back on SJ's career with praise, then, geez, you're a tough cookie to please. And I think it's quite unreasonable.
Yeah, that's probably one of the things that struck me. Like, again, we've seen a lot of people sort of turn on him, even after the Parramatta game, certainly at times during this season, when, with the team not quite going as well as last year, and he's been battling injuries and that sort of thing. But it's been pretty much 100% positive, I think, in the comment sections, everywhere else, like people are, I guess, taking a step back and realizing, the sort of player, the sort of icon he is. I'm really excited. I'm gutted for him to be retiring, but this has always been on the cards, and I'm almost excited to, for that legacy to start being able to be shown in the light that it should be. Because it has been, he's been a polarizing player. He's carried so much responsibility for his team's fortunes, pretty much, the Warriors' fortunes. You had mentioned 2011, Keith. But, even then he was still, from his first few games, he was the magic man and someone that you're looking to do something brilliant, even if James Maloney was more the general in that team. Then Maloney left. It's been all Shaun since. For the Kiwis, I mean, his Kiwis tenure pretty much coincided with Benji Marshall. I know he came back and played in 2019, but it was essentially the end of Benji's international career, so he's the man for the Kiwis as well. He's just carried, the hopes of a nation for well over a decade, and I think he's done it with a fair bit of grace compared, considering, the criticism he's come under, and he's bounced back time and again, produced, as you said, Corey, some of those magic moments. I think it'll go down as, I think he's close to the best clutch player I've seen, up there with Lockyer and some guys like Thurston and Cherry Evans, and it's the way that he's produced those clutch moments. Like there's, it takes an incredible player to produce those moments regularly, and it takes an incredible player to produce the sorts of plays that he does just through his ridiculously unique skill, and he's combined those. I think people looking back in generations to come will, I think his sort of legend will grow rather than contract, if that makes sense. It's hard to put into words. As you said, Keith, my favourite player of all time, he debuted when I was 29, and I was a huge Darren Lockyer fan, and Lockyer obviously started when I was at high school. I never thought like another player would come along to sort of make me feel like a kid with a hero again. But this kid that's like 10 years younger than me or whatever has done that. Shaun made me feel like a kid watching the game again, and he's, as weird as it sort of sounds, he has been like a hero to watch. It's an incredible career, and it's going to take a while to sink in. I think that he's not around anymore.
Yeah, and I know, well, obviously everyone's thinking sort of the playing career of SJ, but perhaps the sort of boring thing to touch on, but one that needs to be said is that from a commercial point of view, he was almost the perfect player. I said to you guys before we went live, he's probably single-handedly, Cameron George is right, responsible for thousands of young kids playing the game of rugby league in New Zealand. He's a good-looking rooster. There's no getting around that. He's extremely marketable. He's a clean skin. He's a family man now, and ultimately he was a great orator, or he is a great orator, I should say. He's not dead, and he frames his sentences in a way that there's no fluff about it. There's no inauthenticity around what he says. When he speaks in the off season about what it means for the Warriors to win a premiership, you bought in straight away. So you had someone to get behind. You're like, he's out there. It means he's not faking it. He's not signed from another club. He's one of us. He's come through our system. And, he made it so easy to get behind the team knowing that he's there leading the way. So he's going to have to stick around the club in some capacity because he is the face of the club, whether he likes it or not. And even in retirement, he probably still has to be to a certain degree, at least until someone comes along that's an obvious choice to take over. Although Tamara is another good-looking rooster in the half, so he could possibly fill that mantle.
Yeah, Chanel's pretty good-looking as well. Can
It's got a
good-looking half over here in New Zealand. Corey, I want to ask you, mate. I mean, I've interviewed Shaun maybe 15, 20 times since he debuted, and I've always found him probably the most engaging interviewee that I've come across. Doesn't sort of phone it in, I guess, with interviews or act like he can't be bothered being there. Like we know a lot of players can, or just give you short or stock standard answers. He really does feel like he thinks about it. For you, I mean, you've interviewed him a hell of a lot more times than I have, being at Mount Smart for hundreds and hundreds of games and Kiwi tests, and midweek press conferences and the like. Can you sort of sum up what that experience has been like, where he sort of ranks as far as a media talent or an interviewee of the sort of last 10 or 15 years that you've been covering the game?
Yeah, it's a good point Keith made that what Shaun's done for the club off the field is just as impressive as what he's done on the field. And you think about how famous he's been, and not that any of us would probably know about it, but to be young, good-looking, rich, famous would not be easy. And he's never disgraced the club. I can't think of a single negative headline. I think probably the closest thing you'd get was after that disastrous Kiwis campaign, where he had the famous quote, "You've got what you wanted." I think that was probably the closest kind of thing where people thought, "Hey, what's this guy on about?" He's been fantastic otherwise. You're quite right as well about Shaun. I've never experienced Shaun not face up, whether after a devastating loss, no matter what's happened, Shaun's always showed up. And yeah, he might have voiced his displeasure beforehand of doing that, but as soon as he was in, and he gave a great answer. He gave honest answers. He was polite. He was professional. And that's simply not the case for some of them, right? Like there's a couple of Kiwi players in Australia that haven't done interviews for 5 years because they can't be bothered, and the club facilitates it. So I credit Shaun and the Warriors for the way that he's kept fronting up, and they've kept putting him in front because they knew there was a bigger picture. In terms of his analysis, like brilliant, eloquent sort of talker of footy. Like I remember, I think it was last year, asking him a question about his goal kicking routine, and I sort of thought he'd give me this throwaway line about how many steps he takes and all that, but he just went into this like 2.5 minute long kind of flowing sentence about everything that goes in there and kind of what he thinks about. And it was brilliant. It turned a pretty average yarn into a really good yarn. So fantastic to interview. I've seen Shaun probably in what I'd call his 3 phases. So I saw the starstruck kid when he first entered the scene. There were guys like Lance Hohire around, and you could see that Shaun was kind of in awe of being in their presence. I then saw him probably when he got a little bit prickly as he started to get a little more famous, and probably felt that the media didn't do him favors at times, and maybe they didn't. And then I saw the other side of him when he came back as a father, as a 10-year NRL veteran, as someone who'd experienced the Sydney media. And he's a totally different guy, So the last few years have been excellent chatting to him. I suspect he's going to go straight into TV, and he's going to be fantastic. He's going to, if Sky TV pick him up, like, he's going to completely change that pre-game Sky experience for the better.
Before he signs the contract, Will, can you get him on TWL?
Yeah, well, I think he started up his own podcast, so that's been a bit of a blow. We missed out on that signing there, but yeah, it as you mentioned, Corey, like that was the same. The only sort of negative I can think, as far as the way he sort of acted, was that comment after the Wellington quarterfinal loss to Fiji, and it sticks out like dog's balls because it is the only time where you thought, man, he's been a bit of a dick, but nothing off the field, no dramas. He talked about that on his podcast today, that he's proud of that, which is really cool. And I've never heard of a player talk about growing up wanting to play for the Warriors that has in such glowing terms as him. And he's gone on to be arguably the greatest Warrior, certainly top 3. I think everyone's accepted that he is now. And he still talks about that he growing up, he just idolized Stacey and wanted to play for the club, and he wasn't sort of a rugby union convert or anything like that. So it's pretty cool to I think, again, cement his sort of iconic status. People talk about him not delivering the premiership. I think he'll probably go down as one of the, along with the likes of Stacey, the greatest halfback to not win a premiership, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it goes sometimes. And I think that every other premiership winning halfback, certainly the good ones, have had better players around them. It has been sort of left to Shaun to kind of carry the can a bit, and I think history will look upon him pretty favourably in that respect. Not as the halfback that couldn't deliver the Warriors a premiership with a premiership worthy squad. I think he'll certainly go down as one of the greats, and probably the we're pretty critical over here, or New Zealanders can be, the fan base and that sort of thing, but they love him in Australia, which I think is a great reflection. Andrew Johns talking on SENZ this morning. They just rave about him and consider him one of the modern greats, and I think that's probably future NRL Hall of Famer, which will be a great moment for us as fans and the club.
I listened to that interview, and they couldn't have picked the worst person to ask. Has he surpassed Stacey? There's no way Andrew Johns is ever going to say yes to that question. I remember when he played, and all this bias talk in Australia, there was a while there where Brent Sherwin was sort of, the number 2 halfback in the game. There's always Stacey. Stacey was the number 2 halfback. And if you ask Andrew Johns, who's an immortal now, at the time, like, who's your biggest threat to the number 1 halfback in the game, it was always Stacey. So asking Andrew Johns, of all people, that question, has he surpassed Stacey Jones as the greatest Kiwi halfback? 7 days out of 7, he's going to say some sort of answer which skirts the actual question. So I think he said he was top 10 Kiwis all time. Like, I think he's probably maybe high, obviously higher than that in our minds, but I personally think he has surpassed Stacey. But recency bias is a massive risk here. So I don't know, ask me again in 10 years when the podcast has blown up.
Yeah, I think the probably the biggest, one of the biggest parts of his legacy, and certainly the part that has put him up in that conversation with Stacey, is that 2023 year. And I think now that we've sort of watched the Warriors struggle a bit, and Shaun's been injured, and he hasn't been able to, when he's been out there, hasn't quite been able to get to that same level as last year. You sort of realise that the 2023 charge probably doesn't happen without him, and so the up the Wars groundswell doesn't happen without him. The position the club's in now, at least from the outside, definitely doesn't feel as strong without him and what he did last year. And even how we feel about Andrew Webster as a coach, it's he had an enormous part to play in it, and in a way that's sort of up there with winning a competition, as far as the sort of legacy you can leave. And I don't think that'll be forgotten, particularly if the club does sort of go on to build on this foundation they've got now. It's a hard one to take. Just a question coming in on the live chat. Adam Burden mentioned that SJ said today in the press conference, Luke Metcalf in particular wants to be that guy to take us forward as the number 7. Early thoughts on number 7 successor into 2025?
Corey, I'll let you field that one first.
You can take that one, Corey.
Look, I'm not convinced Luke Metcalf's a 7 in the sense of what we're using the word for. He's certainly probably in there. So, look, I don't know. I still think probably of them, Tamati's probably the most natural 7 in terms of a game manager from what he showed this year. I still don't think it's his natural game as such. But, I was sort of having to think about this last night. And, if you were to go to market at this point, I don't think there'd be a whole lot out there. The next lot coming through, I don't think are anywhere near sort of ready for that. So it's going to be those 3 guys that are already there, I think, that end up sort of fighting for that spot. But in terms of Luke Metcalf, look, I think he's in the halves, but I don't know. Keith, do you see him as a game managing 7?
Well, I think he's a better choice than Chanel at number 7. I don't think anyone's thinking about Chanel to fill the number 7 role. And I dare say that he plays probably second in most fans' minds in terms of the most suitable replacement, with Tamati being sort of the first choice. But that's obviously because Tamati's recently played halfback for a number of weeks in the absence of SJ. And then some fans will also, I assume, be thinking, like, when does Jet Cleary start to come into the frame? He signed a 3-year contract with us, I believe. I think he's 19 years old. So he's not that young. It's not like he's 17, unless I've got the age wrong. Maybe 2025 is too soon for Jet Cleary. But I'd be happy with some kind of preseason long shootout between Luke Metcalf and Tamari to see who gets the number 7 jersey. But the future needs to be, I think, as we're almost certainly going to go to 20 teams. So gone are the days where you can buy superstars and then just bolster your squad, because you will be competing with 19 other clubs. And Webby and Cappy and Cameron George, etc., they all know this, that the development pathways is where we have to get our future players from. There's no way we're signing a Jet Cleary if he starts to sort of even come close to reaching the heights of Nathan Cleary, his older brother. So maybe we could look at developing Jet Cleary over the course of next year with the aim for 2026 for him to be our halfback. But to answer your question more concisely, I think Tamari's ahead, but I'd like to see some kind of preseason shootout, for lack of a better analogy there, between him and Chanel, I think. What about you, Will?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we've got about, half a dozen 5/8s, and you can sort of chuck some of, I like what Ben Farr's been doing in the New South Wales Cup, albeit in a host of different positions.
What's Ronald Volkman doing these days?
What's that?
Ronald Volkman's off contract, isn't he?
Yeah, someone's someone's actually commented on that in the live chat.
Oh, really? Beat me to it.
I think Tane Tuapiki could be an option in the halves, but probably only as a 5/8. But he's got a decent kicking game. He's played a lot in the halves at Queensland Cup level. But again, it seems like we've got 6 guys that would be a really good NRL deputy with a dominant, Johnson level number 7. So obviously that doesn't solve your problem. And I honestly can't see, some of the struggles that Tamati had in recent weeks after that purple patch sort of, obviously plant a few seeds of doubt. Luke Metcalf, I mean, he's 20. I know he's had some injury problems, but he's 25 now. It's a tough age to, he's played 20 NRL games or so. It's a hard age to, all of a sudden step up and be the dominant, player. He's not going to get the chance to play along. It probably would have been the best education for him, full season with Shaun again this year. He obviously isn't been able to get that because of injury. And frankly, to me, obviously, I don't see behind the scenes. He doesn't quite seem like a natural number 7 to me. But we'll see how it goes.
Is Stacey still coaching our halves, or is he's a proper sort of assistant coach? Because can he create the role for SJ as a halves coach?
Well, that's something that he sort of mentioned in the press conference at the club today, is that he definitely sees himself in a role at the club, and it definitely sounded like being a halves coach is something that appealed to him. He said that he never really sort of had that. Obviously, Stacey was floating around the club back then, but never a specialist halves coach. And I think Shaun was probably a much smarter, deeper thinker about the game than some people might give him credit for. He could be a massive asset for the Warriors as a specialist halves coach, and bring some of these younger guys through. Whether it's too late for guys like Luke Metcalf and co to develop into a top shelf number 7. Who knows? But James Dudfield, good mate of mine from way back. He's asked if you can pick any 7 in the NRL, who would you get to replace SJ? I would probably, if dream scenario would be getting Jarome Hughes in at the moment. There's not too many better around. Kiwi, and love the way he plays, and I think it really suit the Warriors' style. Any others, boys? Obviously, Nathan Cleary is a given, but anyone else that sort of stands out as someone that would really suit the Warriors?
I'll obviously avoid the, I guess what you call top tier halves, right? Which are just not going to happen. Look, I think style wise, someone like a Jamal Fogarty, to put him next to Metcalf or Chanel, I'd really love to see that. There's some decent sort of halves in the comp right now that aren't really getting a look in. Like you look at the Bulldogs, Toby Sexton had been missing out for much of the year. Tough one. But I think, style wise, none of those guys have a great long kicking game, I think. So you'd want someone with a decent long kicking game. And I agree with you, Will, like Jarome Hughes, for many reasons, would be a dream sort of pickup. But unfortunately, looking around, I just don't think there's a lot on the open market right now that are going to kind of perfectly suit this team. So for the short term, it's going to have to be internal.
I'm going to say a player that you guys are going to hate me for saying it, and probably anyone watching is going to hate me for saying it. I actually still rate Jackson Hastings. I think he could plug a hole for a couple of years for us to develop Jet Cleary. I saw I understand the Super League is a completely different competition to the NRL, but I watched him play, and he single-handedly took Salford to that grand final that year. The guy cops a bad rap, and I feel like Newcastle are probably deliberately playing him at lock now because they know that's why he left the Tigers, because Tim Sheens saw him as a lock. But on-field ability only. I'm not sort of talking to the character. I've never met the guy. You hear stories that he's divisive, this, that, and the other. But I actually still rate Jackson Hastings, and I think that any team could get him. Newcastle are looking to offload him. I think he could fill a gap for us.
Not a bad shout, that, and certainly a guy that is, more than comfortable of at least sort of taking control, which I feel like maybe our batch of halves that we've got to choose from isn't quite so comfortable with. I don't hate that. I mean, it's amazing to how few sort of top level halfbacks there actually are in the competition, let alone someone who you could actually get. There's just not that many sevens around. I mean, half the teams in the comp are battling along with halves combinations that probably aren't much better than what we're going to be able to piece together with our current lot. So, maybe once the sort of shadow of SJ is not quite there, then they'll get on with it. I mean, I know that we really struggled after he was sort of bumped out at the end of 2018, but we still were able to win games with Blake Green and a young Chanel, or even during the COVID years, with halves combinations that weren't particularly flash on paper. So maybe in this environment we do have enough to at least contend for the finals. I think winning a comp might be a bit difficult, but yeah, we'll see how he goes. Any more questions on the live chat?
Just
Tyson
gonna
Watson reckons Tomate's our halfback. CNK to 13. That's a bit out of the blue. And Roger to fullback.
Not a bad shout.
Really see that happening. And Bevan Donovan reckons that SJ would be close to immortal status if he'd had the sort of personnel Cooper Cronk and the likes had around him.
I think,
boys, what do you sort of...
Sorry to interrupt. Just quickly on that comment about sort of the club environment that SJ's spent almost the entirety of his career around. I think it took us more than 20 years to realise that we can't blood the juniors the way we want to without going through the Australian systems. And it was a weird one to realise, because the New Zealand system at various stages wasn't as far behind as what you would think. So we were still producing decent players coming through the systems, albeit Point Chev and clubs like that. Or we're signing rugby union players, that have been signed on scholarships with Mount Albert, Auckland Grammar, etc. But the fact that we've now realised we need the 5 grades or the 4 grades, whatever it might be, in the New South Wales Cup, the future is really, really bright, and we will and are becoming a genuine development club. And ultimately, I say this because I think SJ will be seen as, unfortunately, ahead of his time, because I think, let's take Rocco Berry, for example. He was signed, like Conrad Harrell, not playing any rugby league, basically. And we had him learning how to play rugby league in the NRL. That can never happen again. And it should never happen again now that we've got SG Ball, Jersey Flag, Harold Matts, and New South Wales Cup. So these kids can actually play and learn the game of rugby league at an elite level from a much younger age. If SJ had the fruits of that system, then maybe we would be talking a different story. But I think the club has finally realised that it's not going to happen unless we have the players coming through that system.
Yeah, I guess we might just have to be a bit patient and wait for the sort of fruits of what they've sown to come through. But yeah, it's a good point. I mean, that pathway now is very, very clear from a young age. It's that we can have like a Penrith-like system, and someone could be identified and nurtured right through. So by the time they get to 19, 20, they are actually fully equipped and ready to start carving up in the NRL. So we'll see how that goes. But looking, I guess, more immediately, we're in a tight spot, or a tough spot. Have you guys sort of pulled the pin on finals hopes? How are you feeling about it? How did you feel after the Parramatta loss? Corey, start with you, mate. You've seen firsthand more devastatingly poor Warriors performances than most. Where did that one rank?
Yeah, it's right up there, and the season as a whole is right up there, despite the fact that it's obviously miles off being their worst season. But I think the fact that last year was so good, And also, it was one of the first times where we've had a coach actually saying things and the team doing them. So, we've all got hardened to not believing and buying into the hype, but we all took the bait last year because it was legitimate and they were like a legitimate team. And they just have not carried on what made them such a good team this year, for a number of reasons. So, the Parramatta performance, was awful. I've written them off. I haven't even looked at the ladder. I don't know mathematically what the situation is there. But will I echo your thoughts anyway? Like, it would be cruel to put this team into the finals right now, no matter who they're playing. They're not equipped to handle that. This season ultimately will go down as a massive missed opportunity. I could ask you both to list the missed opportunities this year, and you've probably forgotten 2 or 3 of them, right? There's been that many where they were close. But that's also not a positive that you were close, because that's the NRL, right? Like, it's almost always close, and you've got to take those opportunities. So, I think the season's done. I think if Shaun was going to play next year, I'm not even sure Shaun would have come back. I think they probably would have just put him on ice at this point and kind of rested him up. So, for me, the season's done. It's time to start looking ahead to next year and sort of putting a plan in place for how it's all going to go.
How about you, Keith, mate? Put the cue in the rack, or are you still sort of hoping to see something over this next month?
Well, I consider myself an optimist, but I'm also a pragmatist. And to be honest with you, I put the cue in the rack 3 weeks ago. That I felt this sort of numb feeling in the game against Canberra, where there's a lot of less tangible things that, you follow the Warriors, you watch every game for that many years, you just know all it takes is the other team getting their ball in good field position, and they'll score straight away. And I forgot what that feeling felt like for about a good 16 months then. I'm like, that's what that feeling is. Yeah, knowing that we just happen to have a lot of possession over the last 20 minutes rather than we're actually genuinely improving in defence. And our defence has been absolutely woeful. Couple of the Parramatta tries right through the guts on the weekend were embarrassing for a first-grade team. I think our centres, whilst, I rant and rave about them, they're absolute brilliant future for Ali Lauatea and Graham Telfer as well. The reality is that they were shown up in various stages in defence as well. The defence isn't there, so therefore we can't just hope that we have the ball more often than not and score enough points. That's the old Warriors. Last year, it wasn't necessarily the fact that we were winning and looking at the score lines that gave me confidence. It was the way that we were playing, and we just haven't found anything like that. There's a vibe to the team, and the vibe is not a good one right now, and it hasn't been good for a while. And I've been pretty sort of unhopeful because of that. Not through anything necessarily tangible, but that game against Canberra, I was pretty much done then. That sounds a bit negative, but I was.
Well, Christian Catley that does a lot of great work with the Warriors NRL Fanatics channel. He said the season was over against the Titans, obviously, and that was only 6 weeks ago. We got beaten by 60 points, so maybe it's amazing that we've sort of held on to hope for this long, because that was a bit of a flashpoint. The 2 wins since, I thought were pretty ordinary wins against a Origin depleted Broncos team, a terrible Tigers team that has conceded 40 plus in every other game over the last 6 or 7 weeks, except the one against us. But that Eels one really sort of hit me different to any game this year. And there's been some bad ones, but that one was the first time that I really felt like 2016 sour about it. Reminded me of I don't know if you guys remember this, Corey, you were probably there in the media box against West Tigers, second last round. We had to win it to stay alive. Tigers were out of the 8 as well, and we're up by 12 and then butchered that lead and lost 36-24, I think it was. And I was absolutely spewing. I think I went outside and hurled a beer bottle across the lawn. I was just that exasperated. It's such a tantrum, such an infantile thing to do. But I was just like, that's what they did to me. And that's how I felt. And I was in these other losses this year, I've been able to sort of shrug it off or kind of like put a bit of humor to it. Ruth, my wife, has actually watched, especially since the start of last season, actually watches all the games and the whole games with me. And and she didn't want to be around me after that Eels loss. I was just that disappointed with it. And I think it was the caliber of the opposition, that they effectively had nothing to play for, that they'd been on a 6-match losing streak, that they hadn't won away from CommBank all year. And they, came over and gave us the business, played like they were a team fighting for a spot in the top 8, and every other team in the round that was playing for their season played like it, I thought, with the possible exception of the Broncos. But at least, they were up 18-10 at half time. They lost Payne Haas and Ezra Mam and just got blitzed by a red-hot Titans side. But every other team, even the ones that lost, they've really got stuck in, and, it felt like, every team did that except the Warriors. I thought were the worst team in the round by far. That was what was most disappointing, when so much was on the line, and it would have, really set them up to have a genuine charge at the finals if they'd just got the win by any means, and they just weren't even close.
Yeah, there's definitely parallels with the Broncos. We're both top 4 last year. We're both missing the 8 this year. Both fan bases thought, genuine premiership chance this year. And for whatever reason, probably different reasons at each club, both clubs have just tanked. So hopefully, I don't know if it's going to mirror the Cowboys. They had that very strong first year under Todd Payton, and then they had the second-year syndrome. And they've somewhat come back, but I don't think they're really challenging for a premiership or anything like that. So hopefully we'll get our shit together next year. But another year, guys, another year of holding off the tattooist. I better give him a call, let him know, I'll get my first tattoo in 2026.
It's going to be a good time to be a tattooist when the Warriors win a premiership. That's the business you want to be in, look, but can you see, at least with the Shaun Johnson news, that at least giving the team a bit of a spur? I mean, he's talked about how excited he is for the last few games of his career, and I don't think he was, horrible against the Eels. I would have liked to see him sort of take charge a bit more in that sort of first hour, but he came back, set up a few tries. He sounds positive. He's obviously, this is it for him, so he's gonna hopefully, just go hell for leather and try and produce a few of those moments, and hopefully the sort of team comes with him. He's excited about his last game at Suncorp, somewhere that he's, gone and produced some magic moments. That try as a rookie in 2011, which I was there for, won 2 tests for New Zealand there in 2014-15. He's pumped to get on that stage for the last time. Then, a tough game at Manly, but that game against the Bulldogs is just going to be, suddenly it looked like it was going to be such a fizzer for all these sellout games. But now, it being Shaun's last ever home game, it's sort of shaping as a, homecoming against West Tigers, Mannering 300, even semi-final last year type atmosphere, as everyone sort of packs it out to pay tribute to a legend. So, can Shaun's retirement, maybe spark something, at least some positives to take out of it, and, even if it's not a miracle 4-match winning streak and some other results going our way to squeeze us into the 8. Corey, what do you reckon, mate?
I hope so, because look, the players will want to, there's no doubting Shaun's standing in that group, and they'll all want to do it for him. And I remember being at Stacey's last home game, and it was this limp, 28-4 loss to Melbourne or something, and it was just so shit. It was like you were counting down the last minutes of this legend's career, and this team just wasn't at the races. So I hope it's not like that. But in saying that, you've got some of the big personalities in this team who have got a lot of other stuff going on, right? So Jazz isn't going to be there. He'll be thinking about whatever's next and moving the family. Adam's moving on. Dylan Walker's got stuff going off the field. So there's like a fair bit of I guess distraction there, and there'll be some funny dynamics going on in that group right now, I think. So I don't know. I hope that they can finish well, and I hope that Shaun can kind of go out with a smile on his face rather than walking off and sort of having to fake it. But yeah, I don't know. There's I agree with Keith. Like the vibes are off with this team, and I don't know if they're gonna get right at this point.
Just when you when you mentioned Stacey Jones, it reminded me of 2008 was a great year. I think, Will, maybe you can correct me on this one. That was when we beat Melbourne in week 1 with the McIntyre system. That was 8th versus 1st. So we made the finals in 2008. We're on a bit of a high. I think Stacey was with Catalans in 2008, but he came back in 2009. And I remember thinking,
I think he actually took a year. Was he even playing for Port Chev or something? Didn't he? Yeah. Not even play professionally in 2008, and then they plucked him out of genuine retirement.
Yeah, but I remember thinking like this is a concern because we're just going to go. Stacey's going to get it done for us, and I thought the same thing. I was worried about Roger coming back this year. Roger's going to get it done for us. We just don't. I understand there's only 2 examples, so it could be just a red herring. But we just don't deal with situations like that where it's almost like if you're a team that delivers projects, like I'm a business analyst, and the boss goes away and you've got this major project to deliver. Everyone bands together and gets shit done because the boss isn't there. The project needs to be done. But when the boss comes back, you relax a little bit, like he's head on the chopping board kind of thing. He'll get it done. I feel like we've got the same kind of thing sometimes with the Warriors. When a star comes back into the fold, we feel like we don't have to. I don't know. Maybe I'm speculating and be a bit harsh. It doesn't seem like we band together as much.
I quite like that theory, and obviously there's maybe even a sense of it in 2022 with Shaun coming back, even though he's coming off a couple of injury hampered years at Cronulla. And we kind of like that was massive news for us, probably more so for us as huge Shaun fans. But the team went terrible, probably thinking that Shaun was going to carry them, back to the promised land, which and he obviously struggled that year. No expectations last year, even on Shaun, really. And lo and behold, it's close to the best season in the club's history. And a good point. Maybe we had a lot of expectations, or the team did, that Shaun was going to reproduce what he did once again, and that Roger was, going to produce that Dally M form after several years in rugby. But yeah, I quite like your theory there. I mean, I've always thought that the Warriors have had an amazing ability to defy expectations, for better or worse. Their best seasons have come when no one expected them to do anything. 2018, that came off the back of a 9-match losing streak to finish Stephen Kearney's first season, and then obviously fell off a cliff in 2019 again. Similar kind of thing where the lowest after 3 years of COVID, and there's a lot of excuses there, but as far as the club and the team goes, it was a pretty low point at the end of 2022, and then last year was just a crazy great year on and off the field, and this year's hitting it has been bitterly disappointing already, and it's not much of a prospect of it getting a strong finish. So yeah, that expectation thing is a funny one for the club, and you mentioned 2009. New Zealand Rugby League was at an all-time high. We'd won the World Cup. That the Warriors had that amazing run to the preliminary final with beating Melbourne 25,000 plus as we beat the Roosters in the semi, and then just totally fell off a cliff in 2009. But hopefully we can get some sort of consistency, boys.
We've got it in us. When the vibe is off, geez, we do it well. The vibe is well and truly off. We lose many, many games before the vibe gets better. But when it's on, geez, it's pleasant to watch, isn't it? It's great to watch.
Yeah, we can find a losing streak to finish a season. 2012, I think we lost our last 8.
That's what I mean. We don't do it by halves.
Yeah. After Shaun broke his ankle, that was an 8-match losing streak, and then boys, the Dolphins this weekend, they're a desperate team, but they too have, hit the wall. A long string of losses is just going to bring up their season ledger, but they've lost 3 in a row, won only 2 of their last 9. You think they're just going to come out and with a lot to play for? Still a finals hope. They're sort of 2 points out of the 8 now. I think they sort of come out and blow us away. But I'll tell you what, they've got a couple of, one half that I'd love to have on our books, and Isaiah Katoa, and another that is playing the sort of footy that we hoped he would play when he was here, and Cody Nikorima. Big battle there between our halves that we'll see. And I'm guessing we're going to get the same Warriors halves combination when it's named in 10 minutes. But what are you expecting out of this game?
I think the Warriors are a better team than the Dolphins. When they're on, I think this Warriors team can beat this Dolphins side for sure. And the Warriors are kind of in good company in terms of teams slipping away. Like you got the Dolphins who are in free fall. Cronulla to me are just clinging on. Like I know probably if you just looked at their results, you wouldn't think that. But like if you're on the edge of the 8, like you'll be praying to take on Cronulla week 1, I think, because they're just primed for the taking. So there's a few teams slipping, and the Dolphins are probably the most dramatic of that. But no, I think they can definitely beat the Dolphins. I don't think going over there holds any fear for the Warriors. And I think, of all weeks, look, it's, back to what Keith was saying, like, I feel like at times this year, the playing at home has probably been a disadvantage because of that sort of theory that, okay, we've got like a bit of an advantage here. And so maybe if they lean too much into the emotion of the Shaun thing this week, it crushes them. I think it's probably a good thing that it's not a home game. Like I think they'll go away and they'll band together as a group. So I actually think they'll win this weekend. And that's purely because I think they're a better team. And I think the fact that they've got a little bit to play for there, they can take it to the Dolphins side.
Yeah, I'm probably a little less optimistic in the fact that they're coached by the GOAT, and albeit less of a tactician these days and more of a motivational Mal Meninga style coach. We have a lot of weaknesses to exploit in defence, and I think the GOAT will identify some of them. Hopefully, I'm wrong. It's maybe we could go on a run and make the finals. Wouldn't that be a dream? That would be amazing. But I just haven't seen anything over the past 6 weeks, really. To really instill some of the confidence. Like last year, we went into every game like, doesn't matter if we're 16-0 down, we got this. Doesn't matter. Just give us the ball. We'll make it up, kind of thing. Defense is everything in my mind, and the structures. You can put structures in place. Don't get me wrong, but it is also largely an attitude thing, and there's just too many one-out stuff. Like I don't want to be harsh on young Ali Latua here, but I think Brandy was saying in commentary that he didn't he had to get his body right in front of Joey Lussick if he was any chance of stopping a try. Instead, like obviously it was Joey Lussick just barged over. He shouldn't have been let through in the first place. But we need to really work on our defence, and it largely comes down to attitude. With the exception of a few players, and obviously the big one, Mitch Barnett. There's no faulting what Mitch Barnett has done this year. On the game that I went to against the Roosters here in Sydney, he was the only one talking behind the post. So when the boys aren't talking behind the post, there's something deeply wrong. But Mitch Barnett was the only one barking orders. I saw Roger barking some orders after his try on the weekend. You can see that on the TV. But yeah, there's just a lot to fix in 1 week, and I think the problems run deeper than a weekly fix in my mind. It's a full off season that's going to take.
I thought it was interesting that so many people were, so many fans were hammering the attack after that game. I mean, it was a defensive thing, and the Warriors always go a lot better if they're tighten defense and muscle up, and some good attack flows on the back of it. And the defense was just appalling, just basic one-on-one misses, and just didn't have any of the sort of starch that we'd hoped to see from them. And we got the points got put on us accordingly. And I don't think necessarily the attack didn't look flash, especially for that first 70 minutes. But I think it was, because they were getting dealt to when they didn't have the ball. Any changes, boys, that you can get so we can get proven wrong in about 5 minutes' time? I know a lot of people are calling for Roger to go back to fullback. I thought Chance was close to our best player last week, and that you're getting pretty much the same thing, Chance and Roger. If Roger's not going to be a threat at the attacking end of the field, I don't quite see the point in chucking him there instead of Chance. Where are you guys sitting with that particular position?
Yeah, I can't see. It just doesn't make sense why Andrew Webster would make that move now anyway, right? He's resisted it all year. To go back on, what I think he would view as going back on his word at this point, when it's probably for nothing anyway. I just can't see it happening. And I agree, Chance hasn't been the problem this year. You can have opinions on Roger, and obviously has not been used anywhere near his full ability, but I'm not certain that the answer is there. So I can't really see too many changes. I can't really see any unforced changes. But yeah, it'll be interesting, right? And particularly in the next couple of weeks, if it does become a mathematical thing where they're out of the running, do they start to give some of those guys a run? And are there guys there that we haven't seen yet that are actually ready to kind of have a look as well? Will be the other question.
I wish Kalani Going was, 21 years old.
Yeah.
I don't know ages here. 26 is still 10 years younger than myself. Don't get me wrong, but every time I watch New South Wales Cup, he really leads from the front. I'd love to see him. It's not too late for Kalani Going to establish himself in the NRL. No one ever really talks about him. I think he's played 1 or 2 games for us, but I really rate him pretty highly. I'd love to see him get a run. I don't think it'd be this week, but maybe someone like Dimitri.
He could fill that sort of Jazz Tavanga type role next year when Jazz goes. Same sort of attitude, incredibly high work rate, and forgive the pun, but an absolute goer. And he could be the kind of guy to sort of fill a bit of a loose spot there for the Warriors. But yeah, whether he gets another crack this year, maybe not. But that New South Wales Cup team's bloody good to watch at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, when the chips are down in terms of a forward pack, you don't have to be an Adam Fiddle-Blake to look like a bit of a superstar. You remember James Gavet? He was putting in for at least an entire season there when, dare I say, a few around him seemed to be putting in. So he looked like an absolute superstar. But when the team actually got their shit together and started to all put in, he sort of, was relegated to reserve grade again. I'm not saying Kalani belongs in reserve grade, far from it. I rate him pretty highly, but if ever there's a chance to stand out, it's probably now.
Yeah, no, good point. Any other sort of change? Yeah, you've said probably not too many changes. Keith, what about you, Corey? Mate, are you sort of swinging the axe at all, or just leading? I mean, I thought going into that game was probably our best lineup, or certainly the best available to win a game that we've fielded. We've talked about our young centres probably had a tough night. While Graham Telfer got a bit of a bath from Blaze Talangi. If there's someone available, I guess one of our more experienced and seasoned players, maybe they'll come back in. Got several on the sidelines. But yeah, any sort of changes you can see, mate?
Yeah, I can't see where the big sort of deficiencies in this team are right now. I'm just not convinced that there's probably the cattle in those positions in the lower grades right now to kind of make a difference. And look, I suppose the other thing is, psychologically, do you want to chuck a kid in at this point of the year? And there's probably not a whole lot to gain and probably a fair bit to lose. So no, I can't see too much happening. I agree with Keith on Kalani Going. You're right, Will. He could be that kind of guy that could cover. He could go edge, middle, hooker. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him contract-wise. I think he's still not. I remember speaking to Cappy McFadden, and they rate him really highly, but they just can't get him into the squad on a development deal or whatever. I know he's kind of there as an extra body at training all the time, so they rate him really highly. So it'll be interesting to see if they do kind of promote him in the next couple of seasons and get him into that mix as well. I think he's, clearly attitude-wise been a standout in those lower grades that you'd love to see kind of get a consistent go.
One thing Christian pointed out, just very, very quickly, a name that we forgot to mention, we mentioned Chet Cleary just going back way to the start of this episode, but Luke Hanson is probably a name that we need to throw in there as well, and think sort of what do our halves look like, not just next year, but the year after. And I think those two names, Chet Cleary and Luke Hanson, need to come into the discussion in terms of our number sevens, because we're flushed with number sixes, particularly Chance doesn't look out of place at number 6 either. And whoever made the suggestion, Tane Tuilpiki, he could play number 6 as well. I'd love to see him play number 6, but we've got an embarrassment of riches number 6, but the game organising number 7s, Luke Hanson, Chet Cleary are the only names that really come to mind in terms of the future, and not just next year.
Yeah, a bit of a forgotten man, Luke Hanson, and he has looked pretty good in the games that I've seen him play New South Wales Cup. Obviously highly rated when he came from Penrith, didn't he?
Yeah.
Highly rated there. So, yeah, potentially a chance. The team lists are out, boys. Are you sticking around for a few more minutes, Corey, or are we letting you go, mate?
No, I'll stick around. We'll enjoy it.
Yes, sweet. Here we go. See if we can get this screen share. This was a bit of a ball ache last week, so we'll see how this works out.
We're showing our age.
Yeah. Here we go. It's a bit smoother this time. See how it rearranges our little screens there. There we go. On fire. So anyone that can't zoom in and see our team list this week, I'll run through it. Charles Nickel-Clodstad at the back, Dallin Watene-Zelezniak and Ed Cossey coming back on the wing. Okay, everyone will know my thoughts on that one. Ali Leatawa and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck moving back to centre. Chanel Harris-Davida and Shaun Johnson in the halves. And looks like an unchanged forward pack. Adam Fanua, Blake Wade Egan, Mitch Barnett, Marata Nukore, Kurt Capewell and Dylan Walker. And again, an unchanged bench, Freddie Lussick, Tom Ale, Jazz Tavanga, Lek Halasima. So, only the one change there with Ed Cossey essentially replacing Moala Graham Taufa. And it seems like our boy MGT has essentially been punished for a difficult night against Parramatta. I mean, to me, I don't really see the point in Ed Cossey coming back into the team. I don't think he's a long-term answer at all. Moala Graham Taufa probably could do with the confidence boost of getting another crack after a tough night out against the Eels. Puzzling one for me, boys. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, Will. Like Ed Cossey's a known quantity at this point. I'm not sure the value really of having him there. And like you say, Graham Taufa, he obviously got shown up last week, but you'd rather see him get a chance to kind of redeem himself straight away rather than kind of go back and let that scar him too much. So it's a bit of a funny one, I suppose. Andrew Webster's probably looking at it like, at least Ed Cossey, he kind of, I guess, knows what he's going to get, but that really this year hasn't been a whole lot. So, yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one. Hopefully Moala goes back down to reserve grade and kind of kills it and maybe gets a shot again before the end of the year, because you kind of wouldn't want him thinking about that one all the way over the offset.
Yeah, and it sort of abandons the Roger Tuivasa-Sheck to the wing experiment after just one game as well, which I find a bit curious, because I thought, Roger scored a try. Seemed to go, certainly. No, I thought he's actually been, solid when he's been in the 3/4 line all year, just not quite the sort of game breaker we thought. But yeah, it baffles me, even if you're going to drop Moala Graham Taufa for say a Pompey or even a Montoya coming back. I thought he would have stuck with Roger on the wing. Because that's what he's been sort of angling for a wee while, and going back to Roger at centre after 1 week does seem like an odd one to me. But yeah, Keith, your thoughts, mate?
Well, just on the Ed Cossey one, I think, excuse my pronunciation here, the comment from Tafau says that Ed won his last game. So Ed in first grade is actually undefeated this year. So well done, Ed Cossey. But yeah, obviously a surprise for me as well. See him in there. I think wing is one of those positions where it could genuinely look quite different, even next year. I wish Shaun Montoya's sort of, his spot is cemented in there, or, I have finally come around to Roger Tuivasa-Sheck on the wing. I was sort of held on to him being in the centres pretty much all year up until a few weeks ago. And now I sort of think he's the damage that he can do running the ball back, building momentum towards the start of the set, etc., make him a good wing choice. So then I had in my mind that DWZ and RTS should be our first choice wingers. I love that Ali's still in there. He didn't have a perfect game. There's some defensive lapses that I alluded to earlier, but he's just such a superstar of the future that he's worth just persevering and trying to get those standards up on a week-to-week basis. But when's Rocco coming back? Does anyone know?
It's indefinite still, so it kind of, feels like he's not going to come back this year, and I can't see him getting sort of shoehorned into the lineup unless he's totally 100% and probably even a game of cup to get back into the rhythm of things. I actually don't mind. I thought Marcelo went really well at centre last year. For those few games before Rocco actually came into the side and Ed Cossey was out injured. I wouldn't have minded. I don't even know if Marcelo is available this week. He's not on the extended bench. Obviously, wait to see what New South Wales Cup team gets named. But yeah, the Ed Cossey one is really thrown me. I think there's 4 or 5 better options there than that would serve the team A better on Sunday and B better for the future.
Side question, since as we're talking about centres here, does Adam Pompey's goal kick him, ensure that he's in the team next year? I mean, our goalkeeping has been a real issue the past few weeks. There's no getting around that. But who's our goal kicker now that SJ is retiring?
Yeah, they all can. I actually don't think Pompey's that good of a goal kicker either. I mean, he's kicked some big goals.
It's a low bar to beat, though.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Shaun was poor the other night, and obviously he's not around next year. But Shaun, I think, is a really reliable kicker. If it wasn't for that game in Canberra, I actually thought going into that game that Chanel was the best kicker in the club. He was an over 80% kicker with enough of a sample size to say he's a decent kicker. Then it all fell apart against the Raiders, but I thought he kicked pretty well, bouncing back against the Tigers. But yeah, a guy that's a weak
a halves coach and a goal kicking coach. There's SJ's job for next
year. Yeah, good point. But you want a guy that's permanently in the team, and Pompey's probably. Well, I don't think he wasn't a first choice player for the first most of the first half of the season, so I don't think he gets there on the strength of it. He needs to be playing well enough, but then whatever halves combination. I think Luke Metcalf kicks some goals, doesn't he?
Okay. Yeah,
goal kicking form. But I don't know sort of at what sort of percentage. But yeah, it is a bit of a worry. It's fallen off a cliff over the last few weeks. Shaun struggled a bit the other night. I thought it was a really curious decision to give him the goal kicking duties, coming back after 6 weeks off and an Achilles injury. I would have kept Chanel in that with the T, but yeah. An interesting one, boys. Just quickly, Ladbrokes, sponsor of the Warriors Life podcast as well, have installed the Dolphins as $1.40 favourites. So if you want some value, $3 on the Warriors.
Not bad.
I think I'd probably have Warriors as maybe slight outsiders myself. So the value there on the Warriors.
Some value in the Titans as well, for the record. Got the odds for the Titans game? Titans against Sharks. Oh, I reckon there's an upset on the cards there. I reckon Titans for that one.
Yeah. I think the Titans. I'm loving the Titans. I mean, if you're looking for a second team to follow, I'm all over the Titans. Loving watching them play, and I was especially after less than 24 hours after watching the Warriors capitulate. Just the sort of adventure and speed that the Titans play with, and playing what's in front of them. I just love the way especially their outside backs, go about their footy, and good team to watch. But I think they'll do the Sharks as well, particularly at home. Make a bit of a late charge, although maybe it's if you're still clinging to that Warriors finals dream, need the Titans to start dropping a few games all of a sudden. I reckon that'll just about do us, boys, for this live stream. I've just got to do a bit of admin. The mix and pick game. Corey, I haven't seen your name on there, mate. Neither you, Keith. So
I know, I keep forgetting.
get the app. It's basically the joys of this podcast, but in app game form, and you can win some stuff. It's good fun. Who got the win last week? It was a pretty disappointing game all round. Obviously, when the Warriors lose, and particularly lose poorly, the scores aren't particularly high. So Hayley Lister took this one out. She's actually got a pretty decent season ranking of 52, just 1 point behind me, coincidentally. And she picked the Eels to win. So I'm not sure what that's about. Brian doesn't like giving out the t-shirt prizes to non-believers and contrarians, but it paid off for Hayley Lister last week. So good on you, Hayley.
When you think about it, it's smart. If the Warriors won, you're just over the moon that the Warriors won. If the Warriors lose, well, I still got a mix and pick.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like betting against them, I suppose. You're happy either way, or maybe you just want to be, can you wear that T-shirt with pride after you're backed against? I don't know, but enjoy it anyway. Hey, listen, I don't want to put a dampener on your victory. You've done well, and get stuck in this week, team. Let's boost those numbers. Brad ended up with 1 last week. He went all in on the Warriors, carving up, and obviously they didn't pan out. Only got 3, and friend of the show, Mike Minogue, 4 points. Chuck it if you're probably running out of time now. Got any suggestions for the mix and pick game? Question-wise, chuck them in the live chat, and we'll get to them later. But go and download that app and play the game. I'll be sending some aggressive follow-up emails to you boys if I don't see your little avatars popping up in this week's game.
Got a bit of time on my hands.
But thanks so much for joining me, boys. It's been I guess a bit disorganized and haven't had you on yet, but we've been waiting for it, and certainly a great juncture to bring you in after the SJ news. And I guess a pretty low ebb for the season as a whole, but it's been great to get your insights and your thoughts, and can't wait to have you boys on again. And all the best. Check out Keith's Everything Rugby League podcast. It's excellent as well, and covers far more than just the Warriors, the game as a whole, and International Rugby League. Corey's superb work as always on NRL.com as well. And boys, thanks very much.
Cheers, Will. Thanks, Keith.
Sweet. Let's make like Kingz Container Crew and pack it up, boys. I'm going to end the stream. Have a good night, fellas. Take it easy.
You too, bro. See you guys.